This is a reading from Luke 1. In the time of King Herod of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah, who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was also a descendant of Aaron. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly. But they were childless because Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very old. Once when Zechariah's division was on duty and he was serving as priest before God, he was chosen by lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to go into the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And when the time for the burning of incense came, all the assembled worshipers were praying outside. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was gripped with fear. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear a son, and you are to call him John. He will be the joy and delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth. For he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He is never to take wine or other fermented drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he is born. He will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God." Zechariah asked the angel, "How can I be sure of this? I am old, and my wife is well beyond in years." The angel said to him, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and tell you this good news. And now you will be silent and not be able to speak until the day this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time."
Thank you, Michael. Great. So Zechariah was the father of John the Baptist. And when we first meet him, he's described as a descendant of Aaron. Now, if you remember, in the desert, Aaron was Moses' right-hand man and was also the father of all the priests. He became the Levite clan, came from Aaron. And Zechariah was described as righteous and observing all the Lord's decrees blamelessly. So Zechariah had got to the point in his life of right action. And for a man, that's quite a good place to get to. That's a long way to go if you get to the point where you are in that moment of right action. And most of us men never actually get to that point where our life is a process of right action. Because often it's difficult for us it's difficult for us men to even mark the time when we stop being boys and start being men. A lot of us just sort of end up in adolescence all the way through till we die. With women, it's much easier because they have menstruation and childbirth, and that really inducts them into womanhood. But for us men, there's no such clarity, which is why many tribes, primitive tribes, invented rites of initiation, where a man would be taken out into the wilderness and shown his place in the world. And that was often a humbling moment. Now, one of the people that come here regularly, Richard Raw, has sort of become involved in this and saw this issue, and he developed a 5-day men's rites of passage initiation. And it's quite, if you look it up on the web, it's quite an interesting thing. I did it myself in England. And, you spend 5 days looking at manhood, looking at what you you've got in your life, looking at what you've not got in your life, and you go off into the wilderness and you spend a day alone. And it's a sort of fake initiation, but it's an opportunity to actually mark that point of initiation. And in that, according to him, the purpose of initiation is to teach men 5 things. The purpose of initiation is to teach men 5 things. First of all, that life is hard. Secondly, that you are not important. Thirdly, that your life is not about you. Fourthly, that you are not in control. And fifthly, you're going to die. Those are the 5 things. If you think about them, they really are important lessons that, that life is hard, that you're not important, that life's not about you, that you're not in control, and that you're going to die. And these are the key understandings that lead us from boyhood into manhood. That is those understandings are what take us into manhood. And the problem is most of us men just never go through that. Instead, we tend to live our lives in this extended adolescence where we think life should be easy and it owes us. We think we are incredibly important. We think that life is all about us. We think that we're in control. And we think that we're never going to die. That's how most of us just carry on living our lives. And that leads to this extended adolescence from which most of us never emerge. We spend our lives trying to succeed in proving ourselves right on all 5 counts. And life continually reminds us that we are wrong. We keep coming up against that, which is why so many men put such an emphasis on success. Why it's so important. We're just trying to prove those 5 things. Again, Richard Rohr says that a man over the age of 35 has nothing to learn from success. All the lessons come from failure over the age of 35. It's the lessons of humility that we need to learn, the lessons as men of humility that we need to learn, that life is hard, that I am not important, that my life is not about me, that I am not in control, and that I am going to die. And that's our initiation. And it puts us, if we get that, in the right place to contribute. And it's not something you can grasp right away. I mean, as a child, we need to feel important. We need to feel that life's about us. We need to feel at ease and in control. And we need to feel that we've got a long life in front of us. But once we've gone through that, once we grow up and we put away childish things, we face the reality of our lives. And those are the lessons that really qualify us to be fathers. Father, the definition in the dictionary is one who exerts parental care. One who exerts parental care. To parent, to bring forth, to give birth to produce. And as fathers, our role is to bring forth. Our role is to give birth. Our role is to produce. And we cannot do that while we're concerned and thinking about ourselves. So Zechariah had got a point. He got to that point of initiation. And yet, like many of us, even though he got to that point, his life was unfulfilled. He was childless. Elizabeth was not able to conceive. And they were both very old, probably about 40. He was old. He was blameless. And yet he'd not given up. And like many of us men, he still carried the flame, despite what life had brought him or had not brought him. He was still serving as a priest, burning incense in the temple, and praying on behalf of his community. And like many men, he carries on his life with his dreams unfulfilled. There is a kind of service in that. There's a great line in Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. hanging on in quiet desperation is the English way. And there's an aspect of that in many of us men's lives. And it's important to say that that pain in men is often unseen and unrecognized. Yet we do have it. You know, we bear our pain. And in some cases, we try to get rid of it by buying the Harley Davidson or all those ways that, you know, we do, chasing bits of life that will make us feel better, that midlife crisis where really, you know, we just want to prove to ourselves that we are going to live forever, that life isn't, you know, we are important. We try to sort of, at that, you know, again, desperately prove that it's still all about us. But many of us, you know, we just bear it. It's a part of the recognition that life is difficult and that we're not important and that it's not about me and that I'm not in control. And, you know, that is quite a high state to be in. If you get to that point, you know, where Zechariah was, it's a high state. Those of us that have lost in life, we have to bear it. And it's the male aspect that does that. It's the male aspect in our lives that bears it. Even St. Paul admitted to this. He says in 1 Corinthians, I always think it's really interesting, a really male perspective. St. Paul says, to keep me from becoming conceited because of these surpassing great revelations, there has been given to me a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, says Paul, I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest in me. And that's often the male state. And it's important, you know, that we all recognize that male state in both men and women and know that it's going on, even if we keep our game face on most of the time. And Zechariah definitely had his game face on when he went about his work. As the minister of the Jerusalem chapel, he was going about his business, and then suddenly, Shazam, the angel of the Lord appeared to him and told him all his dreams would come true. He was going to have a boy, but not just any boy, but that boy was going to go to Stanford and was going to become vice president of the United States. And of course, you know, like all of us men, he didn't believe it. You know, the logical side of the brain said, how can I be sure of this? I'm old and so is my wife and we have no college fund. You know, what are we going to do? You know, often something comes along in our lives that says to us, you can have what you want. And the result often is that we don't believe it. You know, when we get that smell, that glimpse, you can have what you want, we don't believe it. We don't believe it because we think we're not worthy of it. It's never going to happen. We've grown accustomed to the pain. And really, we can't imagine life without it. Or we don't want to believe it because we might have that added pain of it not coming true again. That added pain of it just not coming true again. And when finally the thing that we've always wanted comes along, you know, we just will not have it. And part of that is that we're so ingrained to life being difficult, with us not being important, with life not being about us, not being in control, that when we're finally faced with the very thing that we're holding out for, we just don't go for it. We don't reach out for it. We hold back. We don't recognize that this really could be for us. And the result is we become dumbstruck. We become like a rabbit in the headlights. We become dumb, like Zechariah. Zechariah is told by the angel, you will be silent and not able to speak until the day that this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at the appointed time. Because it is true. The final stages of our lives is to receive that grace which brings us the peace that passes all understanding. We've struggled all our lives, and in that last stage of our lives, we are destined, if we're able to let it, to actually receive that peace that passes all understanding. And the danger is that because of all the lessons we've had to learn in our life, we don't grasp it when it comes along. We're so worried about being disappointed that we just stay where we are and we don't go for it. And as fathers, as those who exert parental care, as those who bring forth, as those who give birth, who produce, our role is to go for it no matter how old we are. That lovely phrase that I mentioned last week from George Eliot, it's never too late to become the person that you might have been. It's never too late to become the person that you might have been. And I think, that's our lesson, as men here in the Aspen Chapel. Most of us are a certain age, and it's easy for us to say, well, I've done my bit. Let's just see out the rest of life. That moment when you buy a new dressing gown and you think, well, this will see me out. I won't have to buy another one of these. That moment when we just think that. But, there is more to do, particularly here at the chapel. Something here is within our grasp. Something is wanting to be brought forth, given birth to, and produced. And there are important ideas that we discuss here at the chapel, important visions, important possibilities. And, like Zechariah, we can hear those ideas about something being born that will make a difference. And we can say, no, surely not. I'm old. We're small here. Nothing's actually really going to happen. And also many of us are afraid of not being able to fulfill the expectation that people around us have of us. We're often afraid of disappointing people if we set our sights too high. And yet, as the angel said, I stand in the presence of God, and I've been sent to speak to you and tell you the good news. And of course, for Zechariah, it did happen. John was born. He went to Stanford. He became vice president, so to speak. And he wrote that wonderful Jubilate Deo, which in more high churches they sing. But it's an amazing hymn of things coming about. This is what he says. Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, because he has come to his people and redeemed them. He has raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David, as he said through his prophets long ago, salvation from our enemies and from the hand of all that hate us, to show mercy to our ancestors and to remember his holy covenant, the oath that he swore to our father Abraham, to rescue us from the hand of our enemies and to enable us to serve him without fear, in holiness and righteousness before him all our days. And you, my child, will be called the prophet of the Most High, for you will go before the Lord to prepare his way, to give his people the knowledge of salvation through the forgiveness of their sins, because of the tender mercy of our God, by which the rising sun will come from heaven to shine on those living in darkness, in the shadow of death, and to guide our feet into the way of peace. And that is a song that we all want to sing. We all want to say that we want to have a light shine on those living in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the paths of peace. And as human beings and as men, that is our task. It's not just to let it go and say, oh, well, what can I do? Dreadfulness is always going to happen. I can just sit here and hope it goes away, hope it gets better. No, we have to engage with that. That's really why we're here on earth, to engage with that, to give birth to that freedom from fear. And as men and as women, and the male side of women, we have the opportunity to go forward with that. We still have the opportunity. We are alive in this. We're still knowing this. we're still aware of the job that needs to be done. And our task as fathers and mothers is to be willing to have this still be possible. Amen.